Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for coming to the beginning of the 2022-2023 speaker series. If you're like me, I keep wondering, how could we have been doing this for so long? And I think about that with everything. It's things you volunteered for, how long you've been going to the same church, sitting in the same pew. Welcome. Tonight, Babette Huber, our town historian and village historian, is going to be doing a talk on the Bagel. And if you've wondered how that was pronounced, that's this Bagel, and we're looking forward to it. This is something we've been planning over the last year. And it sort of fell through with COVID, and so Babette stepped in and organized it and is doing the talk. And thank you very much for doing that, Babette. While I've got the microphone, a thank you to Susie Mandrino for being here. It makes it so much easier for us, and to have somebody that knows all the technical ins and outs. We had trouble getting the screens up and down, and so it is having Susie here to take care of everything for us has just been delightful. And just while I've got the microphone, I'll just talk about, we've got 2 more talks that are scheduled on November the first Thursday of the month, November 3rd. Cynthia Houck from the Landmark Society is going to be here. And if you remember, Cynthia did a talk on Eileen Malone, and Cynthia is a harpist and brought along her harp and played and did a very nice tribute. Cynthia is going to be talking about, she works for the Landmark Society. She's done a survey of historic buildings and homes in Victor. And she's going to pick out some of the best examples from that and talk about what were the styles sort of over the years, and what houses do we have here that illustrate those styles. So I'm looking forward to that. And then Wilma Townsend, who is with the Ontario County Historical Society, is doing a talk on December 1st. I don't know Wilma, I don't know the name of it. Textiles Through Time or And for the people that are listening and not hearing any of this, fibers of our time, of our lives, and a history of textile making in this area. So we're looking forward to that. And last thing, if we have questions, I've got a handheld mic, and at the end, we'll have a chance to ask questions or contribute your knowledge, because this has been a learning experience for all of us that have been involved in this project. So I'll be around with that. So, Babette.
Thank you very much. All right, technology is not my forte, but we're going to do it with Susie. So, the Bagel, the kids call it now the bagel, but I don't think that even Victor knew what bagels were in 1948. So we'll find out why it's called the Bagel in a minute or two. So Victor was a small farming community outside of Rochester, and Victor's Central School's K-12 building had been open since 1941. There was a choice. They had the building in the village was crowded. So they had a choice. Do you buy 7 acres of land in the village, or do you buy the 175-acre farm, the Ladd Farm? Both were being offered at $7,000. So it was kind of a no-brainer, but the village residents really wanted the school in the village, but for $7,000 and 175 acres, we really got a deal, and probably have been happy ever since we bought that, because all of our schools are on one campus now. So there was a local architect, his name was Lester Ernst, from the Ernst family in Victor. He decided that the best place to put the first school for the centralized district was where the original farmhouse had stood, on top of the hill. So this was the first school. Some of you may know it as the junior high. Some of you may know it as the only school you went to. New residents may know it as the Early Childhood Center. The cost of building that centralized school district, which now was K-12, all the children that went to the one-room schoolhouses out in the surrounding town were to go to this school, and also the K-12 village students who were in the overcrowded building on the corner of School Street and Main Street. There was a central entrance. It hasn't really changed much over the years. There's a central entrance, had an auditorium on the left, and a gymnasium on the right. It's a wonder to behold, said Lewis Fisher in his account of the book, of the building. And the kindergarten room, some of you may remember the kindergarten room. It had a fireplace and a bay window and built-in bookshelves. It was just like really, really a homey place for young children. And the playground was in the back. So this had been the school. It was for K-8 village children, and also 9-12 village and town children. It opened in 1891, and it just became too crowded. So then when New York State gave an incentive to centralize in the late 30s, the district didn't really have a choice anyway. They needed to build a new school. If they were going to get money, they might as well use the state's money. After they moved out, after the students moved out, the building housed Cordite and Magno and Carr, which were both automobile dealerships. Then came 1971 and progress. We have to demolish the building and make way for Canandaigua National Bank. That's why it's called School Street, because there had been 3 schools on that site over the years. So now we're into 1948, 3 years after the end of World War II. Harry Truman was president, and Victor Central School's new K-12 building, state-of-the-art building, had been open for 7 years. And the students in the high school wanted a yearbook. This is a picture of Ruth Aldridge Harder. She was a student at the time, and she did the Bagel cover. She was the one who designed the cover. Many of you remember Alton Corbett. He was a graduate of Rushville High School, Colgate University, and the University of Rochester. He was a social studies teacher in Jasper, and then came to Victor in 1945 as the supervising principal. He agreed with the students that it was time that Victor had a yearbook. I was talking with somebody today who graduated from Gorham, and she said they had a yearbook in 1942, I believe she said. So Victor needed to get on the bandwagon here. Enter Miss Eleanor Mertz. Miss Mertz was hired as a Latin teacher by Alton Corbett, and she too was a graduate of Rushville High School. She was hired with the understanding that she would publish a yearbook. Now, any of you know Eleanor, who eventually married Baldy and became Eleanor Berry. She was a driving force in whatever she did. I can attest to that because I'm an independent. She was Miss Republican. My parents were Republicans. Every year, she'd come to me and she'd say, "You really need to register as a Republican. Your parents are extremely disappointed in you." So she did start the yearbook. She was going to do it because that's who Eleanor was. And she taught at Victor for 3 years. And then because the pay was so low, she went to work at Kodak. Oops. Okay, these are just a couple of pictures. Eleanor became an institution in Republican politics, in her church, and her community. So originally pronounced Bagel, and more recently Bagel, like the roll, it meant blue for the B, A is and, G is gold, E is ever, L is lasting, because the school colors were blue and gold, still are. In the book, in the actual yearbook, here's the yearbook, the name, it says on one of the pages, the name signifies our sincere desire that Victor Central School may endure as an institution dedicated to the education of youth. And it certainly, I believe, has endured and done that. I don't think we sing the Alma Mater very much anymore, but it was written really early on when the students were in the village school. Estella Guinan, who is, there's still Guinans, and we have a board member who's a Guinan. She was in the class of 1917. She wrote the words. The music was done by Lafayette Clapp. He was a principal in 1916 to 1920. And the harmonization was done by E.R. Mann, M-A-N-N, around 1918. And there were Manns and Victor as well. This is the original cover. How many of you have a copy of that? No? I'm surprised. So here's the high school faculty. In 1941, the whole K-12 building had 630 students. There's about, maybe 400, a little more than 400 in each grade level now. The original staff was about 55 teachers. Today, there are 475 in the staff. So many of these teachers taught for decades. Mr. Rose, Charlie Rose, Mrs. Poppenhusen, Miss Wood, Miss Tucker, this is the grade school faculty. Look at the first row, all the way on the right, Miss Brown. She taught second grade for 53 years. How many of you had Miss Brown there? See, look at that. Yes, Miss Spencer.
She taught my husband and
Miss Kufri.
with
When I started teaching at Victor in 1975, Miss Spencer, who was in this faculty, was teaching as well. She was teaching 3rd grade in the intermediate school. Cafeteria maintenance, I mean, I cannot believe there's only, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 people in this picture. All right, bus drivers. This was the first time that it was, I don't know if this is actually written somewhere, but it was always said that when that the village residents would agree to have the school on the High Street campus if all students could, if they wanted to be bused to school. And that has happened ever since. I mean, I know that still happens today. If you want to be bused, you are bused to school. And the first buses were blue. I don't have a picture, a color picture, but Don Green, who I believe is in this picture, drove bus number 1, and he said the first buses were blue and we had to wear uniforms. The yearbook was dedicated to Miss King, and she was the senior class advisor. She was much loved. She was an English teacher. She was more, the couple of people I've talked to said, she was more like a friend to us. So that's why they dedicated it to her. So senior class officers, quotes, just like we have today, were picked to depict their character. The quotes and activities noted still, like I said, are still like they are today. Can you read any of those names? You know who they are. So all the drawings in this first yearbook were done by the student council staff. The editor was Betty Goodberlet, and she was assisted by June Kiesel. And the others were Ruth Aldridge, Shirley Collins, Carolyn Lorcher, Joan Carpenter, and Lois Blasey. These are just a sample. Here's another. I'm pretty amazed at the artwork here. All of the artwork, the whole yearbook's artwork, except for the photos, were done by the students. Here's some candidates. Notice the attire. A little different than today. All of the girls had skirts. You didn't wear pants at that time. Mr. Corbett and Mr. Weaver were the advisors to the student council. Walt Brady was the president. And the student council was charged with creating a friendlier environment between students, faculty, and I thought this was interesting, to govern all athletic and musical events. The National Honor Society recognized scholastic achievement, outstanding character, good citizenship, and leadership qualities, just, I'm sure, as we expect today. There's a couple of interesting, I think, little tidbits, is that Pearl English was in this, it was in the National Honor Society, and she married Lyman Straight. And then there's Joan Ernst, she married Ray Phillips. And Mr. Rose was the advisor. You're going to hear Mr. Rose a lot. You're also going to hear the phys ed teacher as the coach, because they didn't have very many teachers. The title of the senior play was Take Your Medicine, a hospital farce that Miss King directed. Again, we have Miss King, who was it was dedicated to her, and she also directed the play. She was the English teacher. The leads were Lloyd Bowerman, Gordon Fritz, and Mary Hawkins. Other clubs. It's interesting when you see these clubs and you think about the times. It's 1948. And then you think about the clubs we have today in school. Future Farmers of America. There were 22 members, all male, with Joe Barry as the president and Harold Herendeen as secretary. I wonder from the people who were in the audience, was Joe Barry a farmer? Did he eventually become a farmer? He lived on a farm, but did he become a farmer? No. Harold Herendeen, he did, yes, yeah. They were to promote cooperation, good citizenship, and obviously good farming techniques. What do you think's coming next? The Future Homemakers of America, right. They were 30 members, all women. Teresa Porta was president, and Sally Helm was vice president. They were to build better homes for America's future. Actually, this was the first year that this club was organized. Now, the next club is one of the most important clubs in the whole school, especially to teachers. It's the projection club. Every school had a projection club which helped teachers with technical skills, such as threading and focusing a projector. Tony Galassi, Robert Brake, Tom and Dale Turner were among others in the club. Mr. Rose was their advisor. And of course, the high school also had a band. Mr. Schufelt, who also wrote the Alma Mater, was their advisor. And I thought this was interesting. Their first concert was performed over air, WGVA in Geneva. And all state honors, which we still have today, went to Barbara Glover, Ray Phillips, and Dorothy Brewer. And we also had an orchestra, and Mr. Schufelt was also the advisor for the orchestra. And they performed at the PTA, apparently for the play, and they also at a Rushville festival. Interesting. Mr. Corbett was from Rushville. Miss Mertz was from Rushville. All state honors went to Joyce Boughton, Jeanette Lorcher, Carolyn Lorcher, Ruth Aldridge, Esther Aldridge, and Dorothy Brewer. And we had a chorus, and this was the first year they had a mixed chorus. Before, it had just been all girls. They performed at that Rushville Festival and Allstate. And for Allstate, they had to wear formals. That means like gowns, formal gowns. Allstate selections were Sheila Concannon, Jean Lovejoy, John Phillips, and Jean Cotter. And those are all maiden names at this point. So here we have sports, and there were no girls' sports, only boys. So we have varsity basketball, and this team was coached by Mr. Spinner. Mr. Spinner was the phys ed teacher, so he coached everything. The team had a respectable 11 wins and 7 losses. Some of the people you might know: Jim Mangiamelli, Walt Brady, let's see, Joe Sullivan, Bob Bennett, Jerry Kackemeyer, yeah. So these are the games and their scores. Victor played schools before they consolidated, like Gorham and Rushville. They were separate at this time. They eventually became Marcus Whitman. Then Phelps and Clifton Springs were separate, and they eventually became Mid Lakes. And then there's Manchester and Shortsville, and they eventually became Red Jacket. And you can see, the high scores on the right-hand side. Bob Bennett with 178 points. Walt Brady, and so on. And the JV basketball team, there we go. Mr. Spinner was the coach again. The team was 15-2, and the only time they lost was both times was to Phelps. You're going to notice that, I know you can't see the names too well, but there were only like 3 or 4 sports. It was basketball, it was baseball, it was football. And all the same names pretty much played on those teams. There's no record for the baseball because they were just starting their season as the yearbook was being printed. Football was a 6-man touch football. And Victor had an incredible record of scoring in they only played 5 games, but they scored 198-0. So they scored 198 points total, and their opponents' total was 0. And Mr. Spinner was the coach. But we had cheerleaders. And the cheerleaders, these are the JV, and this was co-ed. The cheerleading team included 2 boys, Bob Garlock and Dave Maltman. Varsity, 2 boys as well, Dennis Clifford and Dominic Paparone. Is this all coming back to you, Skip? We have a member of the class here with us today. Now, I have no idea why this photo was put in the yearbook. It's the baseball team of 1928. It shows who's on the team. It shows how different their uniforms were, but there's no list of who they played or what their scores were. And also the basketball team of 1926-27. Maybe just to show you the difference in their uniforms. Oh, overlapping family names is right. There's a lot of overlapping, and families that are still in Victor today. Ads were taken out. And again, the students did all the drawings. The drawings on the left, like the Victor Dairy and the W.J. Sliker. That's one of the people who's sitting in our audience today. That was her family store. And on the right side, just a couple of pictures of what the Victor Dairy did look like. It's not in business anymore. And the other one is Russ Adams gas station, which is also not in business anymore because the Five Star Bank is there. There's Bud Sales Garage. The picture on the left, the top one, that's where Pontillo's is today. And then Boyer's Pharmacy, which is our East Main Street hasn't changed much as far as the look of the buildings because when the whole side of East Main Street burned in 1899, the buildings were rebuilt with brick, and they had to have a fireproof roof. So they've pretty much kept what they looked like for the last 100 years. Wilcox Johnson, which you see in the bottom left, was a large manufacturer of wooden water and other tanks. The photo at the top is the Fred Fowler General Store on Main Street in Fishers. Neither of those are in business anymore. Victor Insulators is in business, and I will tell you that only Victor Insulators and one other business that was, that had ads in this yearbook are still in business today, and that's the Cotton Funeral Home. The red and white is shown, and the red and white used to be across the street in the Walling Block, which burned in 1981. And Vic Tischer's Funeral Home, which it would have been across the street where used to be the Artful Fairy. It's a house. Here we are. Marion Barry. Now, I know her as Skip Zumbo. And Skip, who's sitting up here in the front, told me today that she found out her name wasn't really Marion. It was Mary Beth, right? Mary Jane. So we have Marion Barry, also known as Skip Zumbo, also known as Mary Jane Barry. And she can tell you that story later if she wants to. Bob Kelly and I also had the opportunity to interview Mary Hawkins Phillips for her memories. She lives on Linaw Road. She was the editor of the school newspaper, Hill Topics. Hill because the school was on top of a hill, so they called the school newspaper Hill Topics. And in 1947, they produced a prototype for a yearbook. So they kind of had ideas about what they wanted to do. And if you have questions, Bob is going to be there with the microphone because people at home can't hear us if we don't speak through a microphone. And the only other thing I would like to ask, and that's to anybody who's out there, we are still missing here at the town. We like to have in our archives, we want to have a copy of every yearbook. So we're missing yearbooks from 74 through 76, 1984, 2006, and 2010 through 2022. We have no yearbooks from those years. So if anybody is willing to donate those, we'd really appreciate it. I've already gone to the school. They have donated some that I didn't have, but they don't have extras of any of these. So it would be nice to have a copy of each of those. And that's the Bagel. Blue and gold, everlasting. Thank you. All right, any questions? And we're going to have Skip give the answer.
Well, back then, did they do the annotation by the pictures and everything as you passed it around with your classmates? Okay.
Give her the.
It'd be great to see some of the older things.
Well, I lost mine, I don't know why, and then Virginia Meade came up and she gave me hers. So now, and I don't know where I got the other one, so I've got two, but I lost the one with all my little sayings on it. It was nice. They always had something nice to say about everybody.
By the way, there are only 4 living graduates from 1948.
I think our class was
With 36.
36? Why did I think 42?
So so you, Skip, and then Mary Hawkins Phillips, Jean Smith, and June Bowerman, that we know of.
See? Tough Irishman.
That's from 1948. Do you know how, I mean, I am awed that, really. 4. I think it's great. Anybody else? Who graduated from Victor? One, two, three, four. Who went to school at Victor? 1, 2, 3. Any other questions? Thank you for coming tonight, and enjoyed learning about the Bagel bagel. And hopefully our young people will know that it's not really the bagel, it's the Bagel. Thanks.
So, Babette, before you close off, I was just going to say, looking at mine and then thinking about, kind of the theme, you can actually bring this whole presentation up through by following up through the different yearbooks and see more of how the history kind of blossomed in the village and town.
Well, that was the original intent of this presentation. And then once we started looking, it became like hours. It would be an hours-long presentation, a year-long, So we decided we were just going to we'll do the first one. And then we're going to find some very special person who would love to do that.